Young people who self-harm will do it again in the following year. Self-harm can be classed as highly addictive behavior. I am particularly passionate about the early intervention and prevention of self-harm because during this time, it is most responsive to the support that caring adults can bring. The link to suicide. When parents find out that their son or daughter is self-harming, they often question whether their young person wants to die. For this reason, I want to give this topic some specific discussion and hope to answer some of your questions in an honest, balanced, and thought-provoking way. Self-harm can be performed with the intention to die, attempted suicide, or without the intention to die. Rates for non-suicidal self-harm are up to 3 times higher than self-harm with suicidal intent, although it is acknowledged that it is difficult to clearly separate intent from behavior. It was previously thought that self-harm existed on a continuum of severity with suicidal behavior. However, today, self-harm is increasingly recognized as an important health issue in its own right, with a psychology of its own. Although the link between suicide and self-harm definitely needs to be researched further, there is enough evidence to suggest that self-harm can stand completely independent of suicidal thoughts or actions. It is important for us to understand that people who self-harm do not necessarily want to die. I have personally been involved with hundreds of young people who have self-harmed and had no intention of suicide. Some have talked about wanting to die, but their real motive was wanting to escape their current situation rather than wanting to end their life. I have also been involved with a few young people who did attempt suicide. Some of those attempts were out of the blue, with no discussion of suicide prior to their attempt, and others were anticipated. All were heart-wrenching and tragic for their families and me. Shay's story. Shay came to see me after at least a year of regular self-harm. The 15-year-old was struggling with significant depression. Shay was also questioning her sexuality. These were significant things for her to deal with in addition to all the so-called normal dramas of high school. Shay was willing for her mother to share her story in this book to help other families understand self-harm in a better way. I honor her family for their courage. As I read her words, it was reiterated to me how deeply parents feel their children's pain. I hope this speaks to you in some way, and Shay's journey provides families going through a tough time with hope. Here is her story through her mother's eyes. Our eldest daughter cut to feel numb. The cutting gave her pain which she felt she deserved. She cut secretly. She cut and kept it very well hidden, cutting her upper thighs. She had found a pocket knife which she kept in her room. Our girl kept it all very close. We had no idea. Often she'd withdraw, not wanting any sort of contact. I would simply lie next to her on her bed. Often she didn't want to be touched, but my mama's heart just wanted to wrap her up and take away all the pain. We took her to a GP, and they did all the usual tests like bloods and checks to start with. They wanted to check whether there was anything physical causing her moods. There was nothing physically wrong except low iron. They suggested we find a psychologist. She was already seeing the school counselor. It was in this process that it came out that she was struggling with her sexuality. That was really difficult for us as a family, but we were determined to find the right person for us and for her. When everything came out in the open, she was overwhelmed. She attempted a drug overdose, wanting simply to go to sleep, to not have to deal with anything anymore, tired of feeling nothing. We couldn't believe it. I held it all together, calling paramedics, dealing with the ride to the hospital, the stay overnight, and the millions of questions, until we got her safely back home and tucked back into her own bed. Then I sat in the bottom of the shower and sobbed. I wanted to scream and shout and hurt someone. I understood a little of what my teenager was feeling. This was our darkest time. As a parent, I felt totally isolated. There was the fear of being judged, the feeling that I had failed or was failing her. It was the whole grief cycle, and it is amazing how quickly you can spin through it. I felt so alone. At times, I wanted to stand on the doorstep and yell out.